Hey friends! Welcome to Spirit Club, a podcast and community that is all about doing the inner work to live an aligned and, dare I say, happy life. I'm your host, spiritual guide and intuitive, Angell Kelly, and I'm here to share my teachings along with messages passed on to me from higher consciousness. I've also got incredible guests in store to help you go down all those spiritual rabbit holes. So let's go! Welcome to the club! Hi, Spirit Club. Welcome back and welcome to the next part in my series that I'm calling my Reclamation Series, where I talk about on my spiritual journey, how I've gone back and reclaimed different parts of my spirituality, places, people, things, practices, rituals that were previously and are conventionally thought to be religious, but I've gone back and reclaimed them as my own. So my first episode was on reclaiming God. It's the one previous to this. Go ahead and have a listen to that one. But today we're going to talk about how I've gone back and reclaimed prayer. I really love prayer. I really love prayer, you guys. So I'm very excited to talk about it today and my path back to prayer. So when I originally started to pray, initially it was my time with God. It was a way to talk to God every day, a way to reconnect, a way to deepen that relationship. And so, as a regular practice, I always pray before bed. And I'm not talking like down on my knees, hands in prayer mode praying. I just, as I close my eyes and get prepared to fall asleep, I go through a prayer. And I'm going to share with you sort of the structure of my prayer, but as you'll see as I go through this episode, I think there are no rules to prayer. There are some things that I've seen as I study prayer that show up time and time again, but still no rules. Okay, so I'm going to share with you the way I do it, but whatever way you do it, that you want to pray, that you want to talk to God, is the right way for you. So before bed, my prayer structure is hello God, dear God. Then I share some things that I'm grateful for from that day. I just sort of do a little scroll back through my day and talk about what I was grateful for. And then I take some time to send prayer to others, anyone in my life or larger in the collective that might need some light, might need some love. I send prayers their way. And finally, if I don't fall asleep by this point, I will say a prayer for myself, anything that I'm needing support with, followed by a closing, amen. And so it is. So that was sort of my first dipping my toes back into prayer. It was just the evening prayer before bed. And then in the summer of 2023, I felt called to read the book, The Way of the Rose by Clark Strand and Perdita Finn. Looks like this for anyone watching. And I can't even remember how this book came into my field, to be honest. But actually, I think it might have been through, a fellow spiritual sister. But anyhow, this book came into my field, and this book is essentially about the rosary, and it's about reclaiming the practice of the rosary. And for those of you who don't know what the rosary is prayer beads, essentially. And they are ones that are specifically connected with Mother Mary and I could say the Catholic Church or Christianity, but the history of the rosary and the history of praying with beads goes long before the Catholic Church and Christianity. And I'm not going to do a whole episode on the rosary right now. I'll do a separate one on that because the rosary is very near and dear to my heart, and I want to share with you some actual history around it that I'm not prepared to do today. But anyway, so summer of 2023, I start reading The Way of the Rose. And as I'm reading about the rosary, I realized that I own one. I couldn't believe it. I was like, because in the Anglican church I grew up in, rosary is not a thing. That was more under the Catholic Church. But I realized that back in my 20s, and if you're watching on YouTube, I'm showing you my rosary now. Back in my 20s, someone had gifted me a rosary that was made. So it was a friend through work gifted me this rosary that his boyfriend, who was a jewelry maker, made. And for whatever reason, I hung on to it for all those years, even through my years of not believing in God, even through my years of being angry with religion, the church, all that sort of thing. For whatever reason, I hung on to this. And so I pick up The Way of the Rose, and then I realize I own a beautiful rosary. And you can see here the rosary, it's 59 beads. You've got 5 sets of 10 for praying to Mother Mary, and then you've got some larger beads for other prayers. Again, I'm not going to go into that today, but so I'm reading this book and I realize that I own a rosary that is beautiful and that's traveled with me for, at that point, decades. And so I'm reading this book, I'm realizing I have a rosary, and then a tragedy happens, a disaster happens in the town that my dad, my grandmother, my stepmother, my aunts, where they live. So they live in this sort of remote town in BC. Those listening, you probably know, it's on Shuswap Lake. It's called Scotch Creek. And in the summer of 2023, fires got out of hand. And the day came that my family had to be evacuated. And it was pretty intense. Like they couldn't evacuate by road because the bridge was on fire. So they had to jump in a boat, my 90-something-year-old grandmother who hadn't been in a boat in a long time. So they evacuated safely. And so on this day that all that was taking place, obviously we couldn't communicate much. They were in the middle of an emergency. But here I am learning about the rosary, finding a rosary in my possession. And so I sit down to pray my first cycle of prayers, my first full cycle of prayers to the rosary, which, so that you know, that's about 50 Hail Marys, 53 Hail Marys, and 6 Our Fathers. And so I sit down to do this prayer, and it was the beginning of something I'll never forget. I transcended space and time for sure. I went elsewhere. I connected to Mother Mary. Something unlocked inside me, which is an experience that has happened a handful of times on my spiritual journey. And so I've come to realize that it is when that unlocking happens, it's like I'm gaining back a piece of my soul. I'm remembering something important for me to remember in this lifetime. So I began to pray for my family, and I continued to do that. And every bead, I would dedicate prayers to my family. I would send these Hail Marys to my family. And not only did it bring me some peace because there was nothing that I could do, but it connected me to them in a deeper way. It allowed me to feel like I was supporting them, even though I couldn't physically be there to support them. So after that, I was very connected to the rosary, and I wanted to dedicate 30 days straight of prayer to the rosary. So I did that. And just so you guys know, my parents' home, it was not affected by the fires, nor was my grandmother's, although the entire actual town of Scotch Creek burnt down. They were very fortunate, and none of my family was hurt. Thank God. Thank Mother Mary. So I proceeded to pray to the rosary for 30 straight days. And this taught me a lot. Specifically taught me that prayer makes a difference. Because I know some of you are listening and you're like, what's the point of prayer? What does prayer do? And I prayed for 30 days. Not only did I pray for my family as I was learning the rosary, but I continued to pray for 30 days for whoever needed it. And I actually saw it making differences in people's lives. So that was interesting. So that was the first thing I learned, that prayer has an actual impact. Um, I also learned that focusing on others, praying for others, is like a highway to the frequency of love. Like if you're stuck in lower vibrations, pray for others. I mean, of course, you can connect to God and pray for yourself. That will raise your vibration. But if that's too hard for you, pray for others. Praying for others is like a hack. It just gets you into a higher frequency. And finally, praying to the rosary taught me that spoken, repeated words that have been spoken over centuries have like a potency to them, have a magic to them, almost the way a spell would have a magic to it. Do you know how many times Hail Mary, the prayer Hail Mary, has been said over time by how many people? It gives me chills to think about. Think about that. Think about how many times Hail Mary has been said. And then try to tell me that there isn't power behind those words. So that was sort of like stage 2 of my reclaiming prayer. Started with praying before bed, simple conversation with God, moved into praying to the rosary and learning some of the prayers that have been powerful throughout time and history. And then my next big jump with prayer came when I first moved to Greece. Because shortly after I first moved, my cousin who lived back home, his name is Jamie, may he rest in peace. My cousin reached out to me and told me that his cancer had become terminal and that he didn't know how much longer he had to live. And my cousin, he meant a lot to me. And so I started to pray for him, and I started to involve Shane in prayer. So Shane and I started the habit of praying before a meal so that we could send prayers back home to loved ones, to Jamie. And then Jamie passed. And when he passed, I had a knowing that it was the first of many deaths and loss that were about to come. I didn't know in what way. I didn't know. I assumed it would be in my life and people around me. But what it ended up being was loss for good friends of mine who were losing their parents, their grandparents, people close to us losing their pets, their friends. So we're blessed, Jamie. We lost Jamie and another cousin. And then the loss just sort of came flooding in for everyone in my life. And so this took prayer to another level because I felt helpless in how to help people experiencing such loss and such grief. I could hold my own loss and my own grief, but I didn't know how to support that of others. And, some people are extended family that I hadn't spoken to in a long time. And so not only was I deepening my prayer practice in praying for my loved ones, but it had me wanting to look into prayers, find prayers that would be supportive for them. And so that had me beginning to study prayer, research prayer, and just find the different ways that people have prayed through time. So I just started picking up books, which, to be honest, is very difficult to get books out here. And yet somehow I found a couple on prayer. I don't know how that happened. In English, like very rare. But yeah, so I just started to collect prayers that have been spoken throughout time, prayers that have been supportive. And one of them I will share today because there has been so much loss going on, and I send prayers to people in my life, you know who you are, who have experienced this kind of loss this summer, this fall. And I just want to share the power behind words that have been spoken many, many times. And hopefully this will help those of you who are sitting with some grief and some loss. This is Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. So, sorry, I need to come back to center. So that's what prayer will do to you. So I started to research prayer in an effort to connect with people experiencing grief and loss and to support them. And then I've just been down this rabbit hole, friends, of research, of study. I don't know if it's in watching the way Orthodox Christians pray or if being around these really old sacred sites. For example, there's the Temple of Demeter. And, these are temples, these are archaeological structures that have been around for, 2,500 years. And these are places of worship, places of prayer. And it just makes me realize how prayer has been around forever. Prayer has been around longer than we know. Prayer has been something that has stuck with us in one form or another, regardless of what religion we have. So, of course, you can reclaim it. Of course, I wanted to reclaim it. So, in my study of prayer, I think this study is going to be ongoing. So, today I'll talk about a few of the things that I have summarized in my study of prayer. But guys, I'm going down a rabbit hole. I want to learn more, and I will be learning more, and I'll share with you what I learn here. But in my self-study of prayer, there are some things that I'm starting to see, some patterns I'm starting to see. And the first thing is, there are no rules to prayer. Religion may tell you otherwise, but I know in my heart that that is not true. Put simply, prayer is a conversation with God. Put simply, prayer is often a call for help. Put simply, prayer can often just be you setting your intention. Now, I have seen some things that kind of show up in a lot of the prayers in the books that I've been reading, in, prayers that I learned growing up in church, prayers that I'm using now, and in my own prayers. So some of those elements that show up often, there's often a greeting to whoever you are praying to, calling out to God, to Mother Mary, to Jesus, to Buddha, to the universe, to whoever. There are often words of gratitude. There's often an asking for something, whether that be for yourself or for others. There is always a closing, amen, and so it is. And I have found that, within that prayer structure that you see often in prayers, there is an intention that is being set, whether or not it's explicitly stated or not. And I find this really interesting because, as so many people have turned away from religion and with that turned away from prayer, a lot of people really enjoy intention setting, and it has found its way back into mainstream culture. And I find it interesting because it's sort of like showing us how there are pieces of prayer that we want to hold on to. And maybe we don't want to call it prayer. And maybe we're not comfortable with saying the words God, but we do want to set intention. So, what else have I seen about prayer? Prayer can be your words or words of another. I think this is important to note. I was talking to a client the other day, and he said that he feels called to prayer, but he feels stuck because he feels he needs to recite prayers that he learned growing up religious. And this is not the case. This is not the case. You can, and there's a lot of power behind those words, so long as they resonate with you, so long as they mean something to you. But you can also prayer, hey, God, I'm so thankful for everything that you brought to this day. Hi, God, I really need your help with this. Like, prayer can be so simple. And I think that's really important if that's acting as a block to you. So that's what I've learned on my journey to reclaim prayer. And I'm continuing to do that and delve deeper into that. And, like everything, especially everything under the house of religion, there's a lot of trauma around prayer. I read this book, and it was these little stories from 11 different priests or pastors about their journey around prayer. And while there was a lot that I learned from listening to their own personal stories around prayer, there were some things for sure that I left behind. And those things were, a lot of them felt obligation. A lot of them felt there was like a perfectionism around the way they prayed or who they prayed for. There was a feeling like they weren't doing it enough and therefore they weren't good enough. These are some traumas they are speaking to that I think collectively we may be feeling. So important to watch out for those. And I have found for me personally, the trauma that I experience around prayer comes with what others think. So prayer, especially for my first couple of stages of reclaiming prayer, it's been very private. It's been very me and God, me and Mother Mary, me and the divine. And so because it's private, there's a lot that I don't have to face. And now in this next stage of me reclaiming prayer, I'm finding it is becoming more public, even just praying with Shane. That's a really vulnerable thing to do. But it's been an important part of my healing. And I think where it comes from, my fear around praying publicly, praying out loud is, that I'll be judged, that people's trauma around God, around prayer will be projected onto me. And listen, it probably will. And I just need to be okay with that. I think I like to think about my father. I think he's a great expander for me in this way. He has always prayed before meals, always, our whole life, still does today. And it doesn't matter where we are. We could be at a busy restaurant. It doesn't matter who's around. There could be 20 people in the room. But my dad will always ask that everybody take a moment and, religious or not, say grace. And I've only realized in the past couple of years just how brave that is. And maybe he doesn't realize it because it's so natural to him now. But it's very brave to be able to keep to your practices, to keep to what's important to you, no matter who's around, no matter what's going on. And to say, I believe in God. I am praying to God. I am thankful for this meal. Help us with this. This is very vulnerable to do out loud. So I know that that's something I have to heal and that I'm working on. And honestly, I'm working on by sharing on this podcast here today. So that's it. That's been my path to reclaiming prayer so far. And prayer has changed my life. Prayer is the song that I want to sing all day long, every day. I don't know how else to say it. It's like I feel excited about prayer. I feel a draw from my heart to prayer. And I know it's going to evolve, which makes it creative and makes it exciting and helps me to discover more and more of who I am and how I can serve in this world. Prayer transcends culture, religion, race, time, age. Not many things do that. So if you feel called to reclaim prayer, know that it is yours to reclaim, and that it is something, this is a practice, a ritual that has been done long before we even started writing prayer down. Okay. Thank you for listening. Thank you for letting me share my story, and I'll see you guys soon.